So our topic now is, what does Christianity have to say about the Black Lives Matter movement? One of the slogans that we hear from the Black Lives protests is, "No justice, no peace." This is actually a quote from Martin Luther King, and it sounds very biblical, and it is. You will find in the Bible, in Psalm 85, it says, "Mercy and truth are met together, righteousness," and the word there actually means justice, which is tzedakah in Hebrew, and peace have kissed each other. In Isaiah 48:18 it says, "Oh, that you had listened to my commandments, then you would have had peace flowing like a gentle river, and righteousness or justice rolling over you like waves on the sea." And again in Isaiah 57 it says, "He shall enter into peace, they will rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness or in his justice." And finally in Isaiah 60, God says, "I will make peace your administrators and righteousness your overseers. Violence will not be heard in your land, nor devastation or destruction within your borders, but you will call your wall salvation and your gates praise." And this seems quite logical, doesn't it? That if you have a just society, then peace will follow, because there's going to be equality and understanding amongst the different groups in the society. And conversely, without any justice, there can be no peace or social harmony. The two are intertwined. So the question is, what is a just society? Well, there's several ways to think about this, and I'm going to describe one which is based on a system, a worldview called postmodern critical theory, and I'll tell you why this is important later on. In this worldview, all injustice is a result of unjust structures and systems that are based on unequal power within the society. And this can be seen most clearly in what they call intersectionality. That's the places where important distinctions are made. And the ones that they identify are race, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And there is a hierarchy. And at the top of this hierarchy are those who are white, male, straight, and cisgender. Cisgender means a person who identifies their gender now with the gender that they were given at birth. If you were born and you were told you were a male and you're still a male, then you're cisgender. And these are the people who have the most power in society. At the bottom of it are those who are black, female, gay, and transgender. And according to this system, they have no power. And there are many categories in between as you mix those different groups up. People are more powerful or less powerful, but we can see where the power lies and where it does not lie. But these structures are not amoral. According to this worldview, each category towards the powerless end of the spectrum, the bottom end, has a greater moral authority and a greater ability to see things the way that they really are. Because these are the people who have experienced discrimination and exploitation in their lives. By contrast, those at the top of this hierarchy have no moral understanding and no moral authority. And so only powerlessness and oppression bring high moral ground and true knowledge. And therefore those with more privilege must not enter into debate with those who have got less privilege. They have no right or ability to advise the oppressed because they're blinded by their social location. Their job is simply to give up their power, and the people down the bottom should take all the power. So there needs to be a reversal of all of the power structures that there are for justice to be put in place. And the way that power is exercised is through language, through what they call dominant discourses. This is any truth claim which is grounded in supposed reason or science or religion or authority. And their view is that language doesn't simply describe reality, it actually constructs or creates reality. And the power structures mask themselves behind the language of rationality and truth. And so we see academia hiding behind unjust structures by talking about academic freedom, and corporations maintain their power by talking about free enterprise. Science is able to exploit others by using terms like empirical objectivity, and religion does the same when they talk about divine truth. All of these seeming truth claims are really just constructed narratives designed to dominate, and as such they must be unmasked. And so reasoned debate and freedom of speech is therefore out, because it only gives unjust discourses airtime. And the only way to reconstruct reality in a just way is to subvert these dominant discourses, and this requires control of speech. And so we see the growth of cancel cultures, we see the shouting down of different points of view, so that these powerful voices are not allowed to have a word because they don't have a right to speak, because they put this unjust system in place. And according to this system, they say it's an illusion to think that any individual can carve out an identity in any way different or independent of others in your own racial or ethnic or gender group, because the system will not allow you to do that. And in fact, the only real identities and rights are those that belong to your group. So guilt is not assigned on the basis of individual actions, but it's assigned on the basis of group membership and social or racial status. So those who are powerful are always going to be the ones who will be in the wrong. Those who are weak and oppressed will always be right in whatever they do. Now you might wonder why I've talked about this, but if you read the manifesto of the Black Lives Movement and their policies, and they're all online, you can go and have a look at them yourself, and I'll put up some references for you to do that, you'll see that they actually hold to this postmodern critical theory idea. Two of the co-founders, there were three co-founders of the Black Lives Movement, a lady called Patrisse Cullors and Alicia Garza, have admitted that this is their view. Patrisse Cullors said, "We actually do have an ideological framework. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories." So when we look at their website, we can see that they're not just about racial equality. In fact, they want a complete overthrow of the social, economic and political order. On their website it says, "We're guided by a commitment to dismantle imperialism, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy and the state structures that disproportionately harm black people in Britain and around the world." And as part of this, they propose the destruction of the natural family. Their website, under the heading "What We Believe," it says, "We aim to disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement." They also advocate an alternative way of maintaining sexual identity. They say, "We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather the belief that all in the world are heterosexual." And they also aim to dismantle cisgender privilege and to uplift black trans folk. So these are part of their manifesto, their beliefs that are put out there in the public arena. Clearly, the Black Lives Movement has bigger, all-embracing objectives than simply improving race relations or stopping racial injustice. And so we're actually seeing many black people, such as the commentator Candace Owens in the US, refusing to support the Black Lives Matter movement because they see its agenda as racist. They see it as sexist and divisive, and that it simply wants to promote what they call a neo-Marxist socio-political culture. She said the left wants to trap black people to this idea that they are victims. They do not want black people focused on their future. They want them focused on their past. And here in Australia, Indigenous woman Jacqueline Price also opposes it because it's very selective in the causes or the cases that it will pursue. And you can see this newspaper article. She says they're not interested in Aboriginal deaths unless the Aboriginals are killed by white men. And she goes on in the article to point out that actually most Aboriginal deaths are caused by other Aboriginal people fighting against each other, and the Black Lives Movement isn't really helping at all in this. The rugby league footballer Israel Falau refused to kneel when they were honouring the Black Lives Movement at a football game, and his reasoning for that was that he kneels only to God. He's a committed Christian. He, like the others, oppose all racism and oppression of anyone based on the colour of their skin, but they regard the Black Lives Movement as a negative contributor to this whole movement. They refuse to identify with the Black Lives Matter movement because they think any support would implicitly endorse the greater objectives which we just saw outlined. And in the US, black leaders, Christian leaders, have got the same attitude to the Black Lives Movement. Here's some of them who have come out publicly in their opposition to the Black Lives Movement because what they see is its anti-Christian basis. In Australia, the Black Lives Movement has gained major support from groups like the Socialist Alliance and the Social Alternative, who actively oppose Christian individuals and the Christian worldview. So it's pretty tricky ground to negotiate. How can we as Christians affirm the Black Lives Movement stance against racism and social injustice without appearing to endorse all the things that the Black Lives Movement stands for, or the official Black Lives Movement stands for? This is what Miki Addison writes. She's an African-American lady. She says, "I can support working with people on a common cause, even when we disagree on secondary issues. However, when the primary issues are inextricably linked to secondary issues that also happen to be some of the greatest spiritual battles that I fight," she works for the American Family Association, "those issues cannot be ignored. But I would suggest that sexual revolution, gender confusion and dismantling the family are not secondary issues for the Black Lives Matter movement. I believe they are equal to the movement's well-televised justice work." So it is a thorny and a tricky issue, and I think every person will need to make up their own mind about what they should do if they're put in a position and asked whether they support the Black Lives Matter movement. As we saw earlier, race is not something that's meant to divide us. In fact, it should cause us to glorify the God of variety, the God who created all of these amazing different races. It should keep us curious and alert because we recognise that other races and other cultures don't do things the same way that we do. And we also realise that no race or no culture is perfect. Every person is fallen, every structure is fallen, every race, every culture is fallen. We can be proud of our achievements, but we should also be humble about our shortcomings and be curious and alert and willing to learn from other races and other cultures. I'll finish off with a joke. It's a European one. It says, "This is the definition of heaven from a European perspective. It's the place where the cooks are French, the police are British, the mechanics are German, the lovers are Italian, and everything is organised by the Swiss." Sounds great. But their definition of hell is the opposite. Hell is where the cooks are British, the police are German, the mechanics are French, the lovers are Swiss, and everything is organised by the Italians. We recognise that every culture, every nation, every race, every group of people has its strengths, but they also have their weaknesses, they have their challenges. And it's actually only when we see all the cultures and all the races and all the groups standing together and working together that we'll see the beauty of God's plan for the universe. That will ultimately have to wait until we get to paradise. In Revelation chapter 7, it speaks of heaven like this. John says, "I looked and there was a vast multitude from every nation and tribe and people and language." no one's excluded, which no one could number, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And they were robed in white with palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb." And this gives us a reminder to go back to what Jesus said. Go and make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, in the name of the God of variety, the God who loves variety, the God who created variety, the God who made us all different. And so we've got a task to do, and we look forward to this image of Revelation when we can stand there with people from every tribe and every tongue and every nation and worship God together. So let's go and do it. Thank you.